Alrighty, children with prams and billy carts lining up for their wood ration in the Melbourne fuel crisis of winter 1942. One day I will talk about, I want to interview somebody because I know people who lived through it, the natural gas system collapse in, what was it, the early thousands? Something like that. In the same city. The refinery exploded. I don't think they ever found a cause because everything was so bloody melted they couldn't make anything of anything, and at the end of the day several workers turned to mince and then turned to smoke, and they were without, I think it was for about 14 weeks they were without natural gas, and caused a lot of smelly people. And a hell of a run on electrical goods and all electrical cooking goods. And all electrical cooking goods were gone within about 2 days out of the shop. There was none left and you had to put your name on a list. And this is in like about 2002 or something. Anyway, back to the shenanigans here. In the winter of 1942, householders would receive only 1 hundredweight of wood per week, delivered in 3-week lots. Well, at this point they're coming to pick up their lot. About 200,000 of Melbourne's 270,000 private dwellings relied on firewood in winter for heating, cooking and washing. Denied firewood, thousands of people resorted to gas, a scarce commodity in Melbourne, because of the distance from reliable supplies of black coal, which sort of surprises me because the big power stations aren't terribly far. They're within, well, I don't know, an hour and a half's drive out of the capital. But the capital, of course, has grown today. And they actually have, it's actually 5 separate seams, but these seams only have like a foot of dirt in between them, or only 3 foot, 4 foot of a maximum of dirt in between each seam. And they've got 5 seams. But by the time, if you ignore those little bits of dirt in between, it's actually the thickest coal seam, so to speak, out of the 5 seams banked together in the world. It's basically 100 metres solid, and in some places a little bit more, 101, 102 metres solid of coal. Only about an hour and a half, 2 hours from the capital, probably about 2 hours from the capital, and that's that's brown coal, not black coal, and it is the 25% of all known world reserves of brown coal / lignite are in that area. So it's a bit of a surprise that they're short on coal. But anyway, they probably had nobody to dig the shit out either. Quickly as winter advanced, gas supplies dwindled and the government introduced severe restrictions to prevent the city from running out of fuel altogether. As I said, close to a breakdown. They seriously thought they were going to run out of fuel altogether. Already restrictions on gasoline, obviously. It was shocking. I think you could only go about 8 miles a week with the gasoline they would give you. On weekdays they could only use gas, which is your coal gas, your town gas that I was talking about, that's had the sulphur dioxide removed, only between 6:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. But they're given an extra 2 hours on weekends to enable a holiday midday meal to be a hot midday meal to be cooked on the weekends. They only lasted a few days, the draconian measures, but it was trying to spook everybody into realising that we are in a severe situation. And, you know, bath hot water was restricted to a few inches. When the wood was delivered, it was often so green as to be unusable for several weeks. And they got their friendly aliens, as they called them, set up wood-cutting camps, and, yeah, that was when things were going up shit creek in a barbed wire canoe. The crosses in the winter of 43 wasn't quite as severe, but they sort of still had one, and until they had more manpower, it was obvious it wasn't really going to be completely fixed. Sydney experienced a few crosses in 43, together with strikes and manpower problems. They basically ran out of coal for electricity and gas, or come close to it. Fortunately, the shortage did not become severe until October, but they still had to give restrictions. People were advised that all gas jets had to be as clean as possible, and plan to use your oven only once each day. Take a warm shower instead of a bath. Wash dishes in a basin, not in the sink. And yeah, that's some of the stuff they had to do to conserve energy up in Sydney. Queuing outside a hotel for a few bottles of beer, and a hell of a lot of them have got kit bags, which my grandfather used to have one of them in the 50s, my mum was saying, and we've found a few of them in amongst his stuff, and I think we might have found some in amongst my dad's parents' stuff from my uncle's place after he got bankrupted. Anyway, that's obviously to take a few of the extra beer bottles home. And what do you know? What do we know? I never knew this, but now I do know this. We've done what they've done in England. Melburnians, which is state capital down there, love their gardens, but a great shortage of farm produce, because it was all going off into canneries to be sent over to troops. Forced the conversion of many public parks into market gardens. Yep. Turn the flower bed into a freaking vegetable garden. That's exactly what they're doing. Intriguing. And another guy here from Elphington, which is a Melbourne suburb, ripped out all these flowers and turned it into a veggie patch. I gather there was one bloke, I don't know if it was this bloke or another bloke, they reckon he ripped up his entire lawn, he stripped up the whole lot of his lawn and planted the entire lot out in spuds. And meat rationing come into effect, but the coupon system was fucking ridiculous, because there was a different amount of coupons for each different cut of meat. It wasn't on kilos of meat, it was on sort of kilos and what cut of meat. But usually the butchers were so knowledgeable on how to pull the strings on what worked and all that they knew it all, they memorised it all on what you could get for what amount of coupons. But it was pretty bloody complicated in regards to the meat rationing. See coupons? Here they were in some places, just about going back to jack shit worth of bugger all meat, you know, almost forced into bloody vegetarianism. I think in parts of England it was that bad. And of course everybody got stuck in the rabbit like it was going out of fashion, because English rabbits are feral here. Nutritionalists advised that adults could survive on 2.2 pounds of meat per week per person, which is about a kilogram, just under. So long as they had a sufficient quantity of other protein-rich foods. Bloody hell, there's vegetarians that don't take jack shit worth of that meat today. I honestly think I eat less meat than that per week. That's not a joke. They'd been in the habit of using more than 8 ounces a week of butter, and apparently we must have gone through butter like it was just fucking bongo drums. I mean, I don't even eat butter. I just have this stuff. And sometimes it takes me a month to go through this, and that is just under a pound, just over a pound worth of margarine. It'll take me a month sometimes to get through that. I've actually had it go mouldy and had to throw it out because I don't go through it that quick. Meat rationing come into operation in January 44 to permit more meat to be exported to the UK. So in some ways, particularly with food, we were actually helping out England quite a bit. You know, because they were, fucking hell, like as I said, they had so little meat, it was ridiculous. And, you know, they were, in some ways, they were in a tighter position than we were, and particularly in manufacturing of, manufacturing equipment, lathes, tooling, the ability to manufacture guns. They were reduced to the Sten gun, and if you read about it, yeah, it worked, but it was a pain in the fucking ass because they were so damn unreliable, and they'd done so much to do it, and were using such old equipment to make as many as they could, whereas with us, we were making, you know, the only thing they had machined was the barrel and the bolt, and yet we were machining the bejesus out of the bloomin' Owen gun, and yeah, we had a good chunk of the receiver was welded. I don't know if the like, you know, where all the mechanism that held all the trigger mechanism and where your actual pistol grip was, that was all steel that had been welded onto the receiver. But all your little pieces of your actual, you know, trigger mechanism and all that, and I wouldn't be surprised if the actual receiver part of the bolt set was actually machined as well. But we sort of weren't so hard up for food and machining stuff, and as a result, we, you know, manufactured our own weapons to a large degree and also exported some food to England. There's one here that, oh yeah, butter rationing. Australian ration was 8 ounces per person per week, and, you know, most people previously had used much more. 226 grams, that's 500 grams. Holy cow, they must have ate butter. And by us having a ration of 8 ounces per person per week, it ensured that the British could get 2 ounces, which is 1/10 the size of that, per week. But we had to drop to 8 ounces in order to be able to export enough to them to get 2 ounces or something like that. They used to can butter, and that was something that my grandfather experienced during the war, was getting canned butter. They went out on recon mission, walked right out there, and they had all these tins, and friggin' labels had come off, hadn't they, of course. Just humidity and all this shit. And went real good. They went out there to do this recon mission, took a couple of cans with them, between about 3 or 4 guys, and I think it might have been 3 cans, and they got 1 can of friggin' butter and 2 cans of jam, and they said, well, it was friggin' glorious, wasn't it? And I said, well, you know, we just started digging in and eating the jam because he said we had nothing else to bloody eat. He said it would have been nice if the labels had stayed on. They basically were, most of them had fallen back, but they were going forwards to try and work out how far the Japs had come down as the recon mission that day, night, whatever. Yeah, hang on a second. Well, sometimes I have my mum nag me about, oh, you have too much sugar. Oh, look at that terrible soft drinks you're drinking. Yeah, well, it can't be too bad. I really question why she does that, coming from a woman with a, Grandma, you've got grey teeth. She's got a whole stack of fillings from eating too much sugar as a kid herself. Probably trying to make sure I don't go the same way, but In 1943, they drank the tea unsweetened too because sugar rationing had been introduced in August 42. Oh, each Australian adult was entitled to 1 pound of sugar, almost half a kilo a week, which is probably about that much. I shit you not, that takes me 3, sometimes 4 weeks to get through that amount of sugar, and I don't put my sugar in with a teaspoon. I literally just go, just pour it in, and probably end up with about bloody 3.5 teaspoons each time I have a cup of coffee in the morning, and tea probably gets about 2 teaspoons worth, and sometimes 3.5, and yet it still takes me about 3 weeks to go through that. But they were shitting themselves because they were rationed to this much per week, so they had unsweetened tea, which means, as they said, a figure which gives an insight into the Australian diet and passion for sweets and puddings. It must have. Generous as this ration may seem, it was increased in the summer months on request to allow for jam making. As apparently Australians regarded only a pound of sugar a week as a serious hardship because there were complaints. And women, there were recipes published showing women how to prepare attractive food without sugar. And, yeah, oh, terrible. Holy smoke, we must have gone through some bloody sugar previously. I mean, you know, honestly, like we must have, the way they're bitching about it sounds as though we used to go through about like 4 containers of that a week. Holy smoke, they must have been drowning in the shit. God blimey. And yet, you know, I only drink soft drink generally during the summer months. And, yeah, my mum was all worried about it, but as I said, she's probably looking back at her childhood of, as my nieces say, Grandma, you've got grey teeth. She's got a whole stack of fillings, and I think all that was from sugar. But, yeah. Anyway, as for tea, it's got tea here. We had a population of 6.9 million who would drink per year 50.3 million pounds of tea. What is four? What's that? Yeah, it's 100 tea bags, and that is 220 grams. Actually, that's a bit higher than usual, I think. Generally speaking, it works out 2 grams per bag from all the other normal brands. 220, so it'd be 2.2 grams. Now that there, it's 100 tea bags. That is basically, this is just a tittle under half a pound. And what was there? Tea'd been limited since April 42, but when it was coupon rationed in July 42, the allowance per person went to 1.6 ounces per week, which would be, it says 45 grams a week. So that means that that'd be 1, 2, 3, yeah, that'd be about 5. This would be about 5 weeks worth. Yes, 5 weeks worth. 100 tea bags for 5 weeks was pretty much what you'd been squeezed to. And then things eased off and they lifted it in the October. Things eased off and they lifted it to 2 ounces per person. So yeah, it would have been probably one of these every 4 weeks or something like that. June 42, ration books. Apparently Australians friggin' hated it. And as soon as things, they used to have fake ration books. There was a black market for the, like the fake coupons, There's a black market for the goods regardless. There were some restaurants where, one restaurant nearing the end of the war, this guy said they actually had restrictions on how much a lunch would cost or a dinner would cost for workers. It was like, what do they call it, like price controls, another sort of a communist thing. And just because Venezuela and Cuba. And basically, there were some restaurants where this guy who went there said it cost a little bit more than what the price controls asked for, but he said I could have eaten myself sick. There was that much food. In regards to two kinds of food, they said not that much food, full stop, but oysters and boiled eggs. He said they had so many frickin' eggs and so many oysters I could have ate myself till I was throwing up. And he said it was only, I think it was like, usually the price control was 4 shillings, but he paid 5 shillings, and he said I could have ate myself till I was throwing up. And he said I had so many bloody oysters and eggs, it was ridiculous. Some restaurants, you know, and the right people in the right places, especially if you had the money, there was a black market. And, yeah. And as the war sort of come to an end, people really sort of sick to death of rationing. And there was also a marked drop in the amount of gas bags and gasifiers, and it was almost a mark of being a poor person if you had a gas bag or a gasifier. And people seem to be somehow getting petrol from somewhere, surprisingly enough. Expert advice on all coupon problems. This is department store, obviously buying clothes and shit like that. There is some ration cards. I actually have some war savings stamps, which is mentioned in here. War savings stamps, you had the option of receiving change when you paid for stuff, when you bought for stuff, And what they do instead is you could, instead of getting change, you would be handed back stamps. And those stamps were basically, should we call it, micro bonds. It was war bonds in the form of stamps, and they didn't know really how it was going to go, and people took to it like a duck to water, and they used to basically get war bonds, war savings stamps, which I actually have some in one of these boxes here. Come from the same woman who had all the little things you may have seen, the little calligraphy things which you might see. She had war saving stamps, and yeah, that was what you'd get instead of change if you wanted it. If you wanted your money, they would give you your money. If you didn't, you would get these war saving stamps, which effectively you were buying bonds. And it seems like a complicated system, but it actually wasn't, and it worked very successfully and raised the government a whole stack more money in these bonds. And people, you know, were sort of, well, you've got to have a bit of a vested interest in buying war bonds, because if you don't, you might be fucking overrun and be literally on the chain gang ran by a Japanese soldier. So, yeah, they sort of would tend to buy those war stamps, war bond stamps. And that system went remarkably well, even though they really questioned if there was a point in even bringing it out just to basically penny pinch bonds. But hey, it worked, and it raised a bloody lot of money, and it was quite successful. The poor old John Curtin at the time, he basically stressed himself to death within 2 months of the end of the war, or within 2 months of, you know, breaking the back of it and getting on top of it. He literally died of stressing himself out. And it didn't really help with the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, deciding to trade our troops for American troops, and this, you know, like, our troops he used as though he owned it. And Americans were so clueless about Australia, they actually thought we were still a colony when we, for more than 40 years, had not been a colony. That was, the American president had no idea. And they were just using our troops and, you know, trading them off with this and that and blah, 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 as though they basically ran our country. And they made predictions about how long it was going to take the Japanese to get Burma. Oh, you know, it'll take them 2 months to get Burma. They got it in 10 days. They would send a ship to a place with soldiers on it to stop the Japanese taking over that place, and by the time the bloody ship got there, guess what? The Japanese had already taken it over. So they'd be desperately trying to contact them through, you know, Morse code transmissions to tell them, turn the fuck around, because you're walking into, basically, you're going to be ambushed, and we're going to all end up up shit creek, and plenty of them did end up on the railway line building in Burma, where stacks of them died. They were starved to death, our soldiers, and a local guy who died recently actually was a survivor of that railway. I don't know if it was Changi Railway, or we're thinking something else. Anyway, the Burma Railway. And he's one of the few locals who's actually eaten whale meat. In the early days, he actually got fed some whale meat by the Japanese while working on that railway line. Anyway. Making camouflage nets. Digging a trench for air raids. Yeah. She filled up with water. Didn't work. Intriguing. We actually had, although they never released them, books on guerrilla warfare and everything, and taught people how to make Molotov cocktails, which I could actually teach you, because a Croatian boy I went to school with at age 13 was taught by his father exactly how to make a Molotov cocktail to the exactness of, you know, how to stuff the rag in there and you know, not too light or it'll... anyway, I'm not going to tell you how to make a Molotov cocktail. I'll be against YouTube guidelines. Here's members of the People's Army practicing using basically a bunch of bloody sticks in place of guns. They then decided that People's Army wouldn't be fighting exactly like Stalingrad, and it wasn't a terribly good idea to have a army running around doing its old shit, its own shit, without any sort of guidance or basically any commands coming from above. So they started the VDC, and a whole heap of it was just women who were worried about it, boys, and a whole bunch of old retired geezers who were old as the hills, who'd you know, fought the Boer War and all this sort of stuff, and they become known as the retreads. So, and they made a stupid little a little sarcastic poem about him. Thumbs up, we're in the VDC, the old and the bold who stormed Gallipoli in World War One. They used to call us heroes of the Anzac, but we're too bloody old for the army. All week we toil like hell to get munitions made, whether it's a freezing or 100 in the shade. Then we spend our Sundays on a volunteer parade, but we're too bloody old for the army. Volunteer parade is, you know, just marching around on Sunday. Aha! Guerrilla, Paths to Freedom. The Australian Guerrilla Book, Book 1. The Australian Guerrilla Book 1, Shoot to Kill. And, yeah. The desperation of the hour calls for the immediate study of guerrilla warfare. That's what's written there. Never actually got released. Oh, yeah. That's one of the well-known newspapers. Down in the capital down here, were so shitting themselves over air raids, they sandbagged the front of the building, and I mean, holy smoke. The guy sitting at the desk there, look at this friggin' sandbags over him. That's just down in the state capital here, you know. I'm pretty certain I know where that building is, actually. GPO in Melbourne, I know exactly where that is. Glorious old building. Bloody beautiful old building. Real, you know, old British architecture going into that thing. Bricked the windows up and boarded it up as an air raid precaution. She was pretty dark inside. There's a government building there in Brisbane, which is Queensland. That's up in the north. I've been there. Obviously, I've been to every state capital. And they are putting, I had a good look before, but it's basically about 3 layers of bricks in front of the government building. So 3 layers of bricks, and I mean, it's not just pissing round. I'm pretty certain they're mortared all those in and everything. And I mean, that would be a frickin' pretty damn good. That would take all your shrapnel without a problem, 3 layers of bricks. It's, you know, like, oh yeah, shit would get through it. Today's cruise missiles would go straight through it like it didn't mean a fucking thing. But just the old bombs of your basic bombs, you know, dropped in World War II, that would absorb all the shrapnel without a problem, I would presume, although I'm not an expert on it all.